It's Fill Your Plate Now, where every bite brings you closer to the farm gate and further from what's unhealthy. Now, here's your hosts, Julie and Tammy, helping you live well by filling your plate well.
So while I have a wonderful guest on today, I am, as the host, playing solo. And my partner in crime, Tammy Baker with the Arizona Milk Producers, is not here with me. So I'm kind of feeling a little bit lonely, at least here in the studio. But she gets to do that next week because I won't be available. And we know as a co-host kind of environment, we can cover for each other if the other one's too busy. And I will say about Tammy Baker, she's traveling way more than me, even though her and I both have really busy lives on behalf of the farmers and ranchers that we serve, myself with Arizona Farm Bureau and Tammy with the Arizona Milk Producers. But we love what we do, and we have a passion also for our podcast, Fill Your Plate Now, and we just really appreciate all of our listeners that listen to us on a regular basis. And please tell your friends and family, because as we always have, and we are about to have in today's podcast, a very powerful and insightful speaker, Samantha Barncastle, Executive Director with the Family Farm Alliance. She's an attorney based in New Mexico, and I'm not going to go major in depth because I don't want to steal her thunder on her bio and her background. But Samantha, welcome to the Fill Your Plate Now podcast.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to be here.
And I want you to kind of give us your story, starting on your own farm. I believe it was in New Mexico, correct? And just laying out how that kind of prepared you for what you do today, not only as an attorney, because you have a pretty interesting slate of insights being an attorney, but also newly executive director for the Family Farm Alliance as of November, I believe.
That's right. So I grew up in and around southern New Mexico. My dad was a conservation officer. My grandfather is a farmer and had a sort of farm to table local grocery store that he ran. My great uncle and many of my aunts and uncles were all farmers, and just generally an ag centric family. And I actually was sort of set on the path to go to law school a very long time ago when I was young, and we were out on the family farm one evening for a birthday party. And for those of you in the Southwest familiar with water, you know that there's not always water in your canals. And even when there is, it's not your water necessarily. But we got a phone call that night from our ditch writer in the irrigation district, and they said, your water's coming. And the guys all grabbed their boots and shovels and ran out the back door to go irrigate. And I went to go with them. I am the only girl in a family of boys, and I have a lot of cousins and whatnot. And my grandpa stopped me at the back door, and he said, "No, ma'am, you're staying here." And I was furious. I mean, it was like, "How dare you?" And so the next morning at breakfast, and my family did meals together. That was just our thing. We always were together over food. Um, my grandmother said, Mijita, listen to what your grandfather has to say because he's got something really important to share with you. And of course, I was still furious that I was left out of irrigating the night before. And grandpa was not really like a talker, but when he did talk, you had to listen. It was very important, whatever he was going to say. And what he said was, looking back, really cool from where I'm sitting right now. But what he said was, I have plenty of boys who can go out there with me and irrigate this farm and get the, production side of it done. What I don't have is someone who's going to protect this farm and protect all farms. And he said, you're going to law school. You're just too smart for this. And I immediately was like, oh, well, yeah, of course, And so it kind of all made sense then why he didn't want me on a certain path, why he wanted me to focus on my education. And my dad, like I said, was already in the conservation world. And so I went to law school and I became a water lawyer, and I practice water and natural resources now for going on 18 years. And really it's a privilege to be in this industry because I'm not fighting some of those uglier court battles, but water is something that you can choose to fight over or you can choose to collaborate over. So for 17 years I litigated and fought over it, and when this opening came open with the Family Farm Alliance, I decided it was a great time to transition, use the skills I had gained, but become more collaborative and try to educate and bring people together and essentially try the case of Western irrigated agriculture in the court of public opinion rather than in a courtroom in a dispute setting in an effort to try to prevent disputes, essentially. So, yeah.
You always seem to get shy when I mention this, but you were one of the young, and you still are. You're younger than me, being one of the youngest attorneys ever licensed to practice law in New Mexico. So your grandpa, I'm glad he inspired you. And the other thing I'm glad about that is that you agreed with him. You liked that he had an idea for you. He had a vision for you. So I think that's so cool.
Yeah, Grandpa really saw the lay of the land different than any one of us could have at that time. Our family had been through court battles and adjudications and Supreme Court litigation and, all sorts of stuff dating back to the 1830s when they first settled in this area and started farming. And so he really saw the lay of the land different. Our family helped with some of the big reclamation projects and all of that. And could see the writing on the wall that we were going to continue to have to educate and elevate our story to keep our family and our livelihood and our culture what it traditionally has been. And yeah, I was very young when I got started, and I often am shy about that because I'm still not used to being taken seriously in some ways because I have been so young most of my career. I was always just like the fly on the wall in the room in these big important conversations, but that actually worked to my benefit because people would talk to me about things they otherwise wouldn't talk to other people about because I sort of disarmed them being so young. They didn't, they took it for granted that I was opposing counsel or whatever. And we started really actually getting to a place where we could collaborate when people realized that I had skills. So, but yeah, being young sometimes works against you.
But I do love what Ivanka Trump just said today on speaking of a podcast. She said she was always underestimated. And she said, and she goes, it actually works to your advantage because when people make that assumption, they just don't realize. And I just love that. You can work it to your advantage, and I can tell that you did. And you married a farmer, and you guys are operating a pecan orchard. So you stayed embedded in it, and then on top of that, you're maximizing on that legal side of your life on behalf of the Farm Family Alliance, which prompts the very next question. Tell us about the organization. Why is it important for us to know about whether we're in farming or just a consumer listening about how well we do our agriculture here in America?
Yeah. So I always like to say if you eat food, you're in agriculture, right? That's like one of our buzz topics that we talk about, that everyone needs to be more cognizant of where their food comes from. And that's truly the foundation of the Family Farm Alliance. We are a grassroots organization of Western irrigated agriculture producers. So the 17 Western arid states that don't have a lot of water, that rely on infrastructure and planning and really frankly innovation to get water to the farm to grow food. We've got tons of sunshine out here, but the water is the tricky piece. And so our goal and our sole purpose is to really elevate the message of the producers when it comes to water in the West and what we need to continue to produce food for the nation and the world. So we are all producers. My husband is, as you said, a pecan farmer, and he also has a cattle operation. My family still maintains agriculture ties, a number of different ag ties. We're always in one thing or another, whether it's raising stock with the nieces and nephews or, participating in the state and local fairs and all the different things we do. But the Family Farm Alliance is a bunch of people just like me too. So it's not just me that's like this. It's all of our membership are all of your rural roots people from throughout the West that are producing food on a real-time basis.
And back to your point in the beginning of this me asking that question is that you said we're all in ag because we all eat. And so it's full circle every time you sit down at the dinner table, whether that's breakfast, lunch, or dinner. We're all participating in ag. The other thing that's important for me, and when I first chatted with you, it really struck me, why is the West so important? Now, there's a statistic out there, and maybe it did come from the Family Farm Alliance, that while we're only the land available to farm, separate from our ranch lands on public lands or private lands where we've got cattle grazing, in terms of irrigated acreage, it's only about 20% compared to the rest of the United States. But the claim is we produce about 60% of the crop production, especially our fruits and vegetables and stuff like that. So that right there is one of the reasons why ag in the West is so important. But what are some of the other overriding points that you like to highlight?
So that's actually a great question because everybody always asks the question, why are we growing food in the desert where we don't have water? Well, it's because we grow really cool, very special things out here. And we grow foods that the consumers want. And we know that because they keep purchasing them. But you have more of your staple crops when you're talking about looking more east. Out west, we have a variety, and I mean a wide variety, but we're the larger cattle producers, we're the larger specialty crop producers, and each state's economy is built around agriculture out here in large part. And so when you talk about why we're special and why it works out here, well, certain crops really only like to grow out here, first of all. And we can grow more crop per drop of water on a lot of different types of crops out here than you can in other areas of the world. But most importantly, we are the foundation for rural communities. The West would not exist had it not been for farmers and miners who moved out west to settle the area and make it inhabitable. And over the long term, it really was the agriculture economy that stood up the West in a continuous way. When mines ran dry or mining communities left the area, farmers stayed and then cities followed because of the rural economies. So um, we're more than just the crops we're growing. We're the people, we're the community, we're the culture out here too.
Right. And just your own family's example of that. What a heritage. Barn Castle. I'm curious about that surname. Uh, and it's so appropriate for you. Converting a barn to a cancel or a castle. What'd you say?
It's such an ironic last name to have being in this business.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. I love it.
Its origin is from Eastern Europe. My a portion of my family immigrated from they have both Irish and German descent coming from that area, and they came through Staten Island. And we're not really sure the true origin, but we had traced it back to some areas of the old country. So I'm not sure it was something that got changed when they got here. But yeah, it is very unique and odd that I would end up with that last name and in this business.
I know. I love it. It's perfect. So, getting back to like the production and the scale and how we can do so much with so little, a lot of this has to do with targeted managed water application, irrigation, aka irrigation. I mean, California alone leads the nation in ag receipts, cash receipts, and states like Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Arizona produce massive volumes. You pointed this out earlier, the fruits and the vegetables and the nuts and dairy. So we know it's agriculture, but give us more of a picture of, I mean, it's irrigation. Give us more of a picture why it's irrigation.
Our focus is irrigated agriculture because a lot of these communities would not exist without these large water systems that the farmers built with the assistance of the federal government to make it possible to inhabit the local area. Before you could inhabit the local area, you had to know that you had a stable source of food and water supply. So our focus has been on the infrastructure that makes that possible, that supports these local communities and keeps those specialty and other crops growing. And we rely heavily on everything from on-farm technologies to system improvements. The system level improvements can get really, really large in scale or be fairly small and make a difference. And there's this common misconception that farmers just like to pour themselves a cup of coffee every morning and go out and flip on the well or open up the head gate and just watch the water run across the land. And that couldn't be further from the truth in terms of what we're doing and how we're using water. We have, and a lot of us have gotten down to the science on this, where we have root zone measurements of water, and we know when these crops need water based on what they are and where you're growing them. And we're trying actively not to apply too much water, which can obviously still be detrimental to a crop, but it's not what you want to do when you're trying to save water out west. So there's this common misconception that farmers just like to watch the water flow, and that's why we built these big projects. But in reality, the reason we did this and the way we practice what we do is with a conservation mindset of never using more than you actually need and never harming the resource, because it's got to be there for you again next year.
I even have heard that some of the newest pecan and pistachio orchards, and they may be doing it more with pistachio trees, where they literally embed a digital monitor so they know exactly how much that individual tree needs in terms of water. And that's all they give it. The tree right next to it might need slightly more. So these digitized, I'm going to call them trunk water monitors. I don't know what the official name is, but it's very scientific, and all the different methods between drip irrigation, the pivots, the soil monitors that again and they can pull it up on their smartphone or their iPad, and they can monitor just exactly the level of soil moisture in that field. Precision agriculture. So it's very important here in the Arizona to what you said earlier. Every drop counts for us here in the West. And we don't think about the national impact. We get real regionalized a lot of times, or state by state. I'm an Arizonan, so I'm going to be hyper focused on our food production here in this state. But the Western farms, based on all the challenges they face because of drought and other challenges that are taking place, it can ripple across the United States food supply just because of what we produce here. Can you walk us through how Western states truly contribute to the national food security, not just for our own states, but even nationally?
Yeah. So food security is a huge topic for us because we often talk in terms of, drought in the West, but you don't want to solve a water problem by creating a food security crisis. Food security for our nation is national security for our nation. And proof of that is looking at the Iran conflict right now and some of the countries that rely on shipments through the Strait of Hormuz and how they're having trouble and worried about their supply of food, basically, that they only have a 6 month supply of grain. Well, within the United States, we export and import a lot, but a lot of what we grow in the Western states stays here in the United States for consumption here. And so when you talk about if you're going to be eating a salad in the winter months here in the United States, there is one area of the country that that salad likely came from, and that is either the Yuma area or the Coachella Imperial Irrigation District areas. That's it. 95% of our winter vegetables come out of that little tiny area of the world, and feed our entire country. And so it's not just those local economies at that point. It's the whole country relying on us being able to continue to grow that food. And when we talk about, water and exporting water because we're exporting grain or exporting some sort of commodity that we've, made with the water, we maybe need to start thinking in terms of how much food we waste here in America. If you knew it took you a gallon to grow that tomato on your plate and another gallon to grow that head of lettuce and another gallon to maybe put that steak on your plate, and at the end of the night you scrape half of that food off, if you were to switch that out in your head with pouring out 3 gallons of water, just pouring it down the drain for no reason, we might start thinking differently about both our food and water security, but they're connected and they are also essential to our national security and our autonomy, basically our survival.
Sam, you would have been proud of us at the Arizona Farm Bureau a couple of years ago. We produced a mini video that highlighted how much water it takes to produce your hamburger. So,
That's exactly what I'm talking about. We have some of those figures. I don't have them at my fingertips, but we know about how many drops it takes per crop, right? And so we know, and that's one of the reasons you won't ever catch me scraping food off into the trash.
yeah, yep, cook for what you need and then finish your plate. Of course, it's easy for me to finish my plate because I love food, and especially the food we grow here in America, and certainly here in Arizona and New Mexico. So let's talk about these Western states and the economic viability they bring to, this is beyond the grocery store. Western ag supports rural economies, jobs, and the environmental benefits of the way we manage our water. So, how does keeping the family farm viable in the West strengthen Arizona's overall food resilience and certainly these communities, these rural communities?
Yeah. So again, when we talk about agriculture in the West, you're not just talking about the farm. You're talking about all of the support businesses that support that farm. You're talking about the community that's able to survive in that area because the farm brought water to that area. You have to remember that wherever there's cities, there was a farm that first brought the water to the area. So those farmers are not just essential to our food security, they're essential to our rural economies, our food supply, but also the larger cities and the larger landscape. If these green spaces start drying up, we know for a fact that when you're not applying water to land, the surface temperature heats up. So we will start seeing these temperatures, like in the downtown area of Las Cruces, it's often about 5 degrees warmer than it is out here on the farm where I am. If my farm wasn't here, there would be a larger footprint of that heat area. And we all know that that's not what is good for our natural world, right? And if you have any thought that if farmers go away, we will have a better natural world, then what you need to think about is the fact that these waters, these rivers that we've controlled, they used to decimate local communities, riparian habitat, and all of that when they ran in those big, large monsoon events. And we are now starting to see those large monsoon events in a more intense way than we did at one point in time, and we're adapting our infrastructure for that, just like we did when we initially built the infrastructure. So this infrastructure is not just for the purpose of growing food, it's also to protect the local community. It's to protect against flooding, it's to protect against damage that this wild water would otherwise cause. And so taking the farmer out of the equation destabilizes not just the economy, the food supply, but also public safety and the habitat that you think you might get in return. It might be there for a little while, and then flood's going to wipe it out, or fire. So there's a reason why we advocate for smart management that works on the ground with the farmer, with the natural landscape, and brings everything together so that it's not one wins over the other, but it's looking at the big picture and saying all of these pieces have to work together. And so fallowing can't be the answer when we're running out of water.
Right. I so agree with that, Samantha. The There is a reason the developers like farmland when they decide to build homes or something else. It's because of all of the infrastructure that's already built in, and some of that infrastructure are the canals, the ditches, the irrigation district. That irrigation district will still exist. Some of the people on the board might change and shift as in areas where, and it breaks my heart at times, a lot of times, when ag moves away and development comes in. But that infrastructure was really built. You can look at history across the globe, just what moves in first, and usually it's agriculture, which also brings up another question I have for you. The Alliance is really laser focused on some infrastructure improvements with irrigation in specific areas in the western states. What's all that about?
Well, a lot of what we focus on is more broad than just irrigation. It's keeping the water flowing. And so, how do we keep the water flowing to our irrigators? Well, there might be dams and more storage needed in some areas. There might be groundwater recharge projects in some areas. We might start looking at desal, and it could be ocean desal or brackish desal if it's inland. We might start looking at rain enhancement, and there's some new technologies out there that apparently you can like capture air and suck the water molecules out of the air. I mean, we're looking at everything to keep the water flowing for the farmers so they can keep producing food and keep anchoring these local communities out here. But infrastructure is a big one for us because, as with anything, you can't just buy a car and call it one and done, right? You've got to change the oil, update the tires, you've got to wash it every now and then, make sure there's no cracks or rust and things happening. So we've got to maintain what we have, but then every now and then you notice, oh, there is a problem. Now I've got to upgrade it. I might as well upgrade it if we're doing all this work. So we're constantly adapting, and that means we focus a lot on our infrastructure to keep the water flowing, but we also like to think about big ideas. You know, we do a lot of work on the hill in DC, and my farmers like to tell me the great ideas, they don't come from the hill. They come from the west.
I bet it would be fun to be a fly on the wall at some of those board meetings, especially if it's just a round robin discussing some of the technology improvements and or potential of new technologies. I love it that the Family Farm Alliance is hyper focused on the big new thing, because there may be a big new thing, or to something you said earlier, it might be a small shift and something we've already been doing. Sometimes the smallest changes make the biggest impact. But to be a fly on the wall at one of your board meetings might be kind of fun.
And it might be an all of the above approach, right? We might have one farmer who's trying out a new form of mobile sprinkler, that's a combination of sprinkler and drip, while we have another farmer who has just figured out a different, more economical way to laser level his field. And the two of them combined are now unstoppable, right? So my board meetings are incredible. I like to remind people, these farmers, they are the most adaptable, the most flexible, the most innovative. And people, it's almost like me, you know, when I was young and just practicing and being underestimated. People underestimate my farmers daily. And these guys are nothing short of geniuses at times in terms of the innovation it takes to keep their operations going with all of the trouble that's thrown their way.
Exactly. Speaking of innovation, what are the bright spots when it's in regards to innovation or technology that excite you the most from your own personal perspective, having grown up on a farm, now married into another farm family? You know, you're embedded in it deep. What excites you the most about innovation and technology?
You know, I'm watching my farmers run their farms from their cell phone using AI and telemetry and satellites and root zone technology. And that's not to say they're not on the farm. They're still out there in their field working with the crop. Hands on, but some of what we're seeing happen in our precision agriculture sphere and in technology for irrigation level system level stuff, man, it is so cool. I mean, you have everything from automation and all of these different things that literally you can do from your cell phone. And so it, in terms of what farmers deal with regularly, it is stress because of the both known and unknown. I know I have X, Y, and Z problems today. I probably also have issues with A, B, and C, but let me start with these and I'll get to it. But at least this way they can say, okay, I know I have X, Y, and Z problems, but I can monitor the other things from my cell phone while I get going on those. And it helps with time management, stress management, and then it helps them actually become better farmers because they can focus on those problem areas they may not have had time to focus on before. And the same with our irrigation managers. We're seeing technology make huge gains for us in those both farm level and system level. And Man, it's just so cool to sit back and watch my farmers embrace that.
The Family Farm Alliance has testified numerous times, certainly before Congress mainly, right? And
Yeah.
a lot of it has helped shape the conversation and even influence infrastructure improvements. But right now, what recent and upcoming policy changes give you hope for a stronger water certainty and food security, certainly in the West?
So right now, we are really pleased to see the Farm Bill moving. We're pleased to see some bipartisanship in permit reform talking. What we advocate for are durable solutions, um, solutions that will set farmers up for success, but without harming the natural landscape. So I always tell people, we're not asking to be exempted from all of this stuff. We're just asking to make the policy meet us at the field level where it really matters. And right now, like I said, those are probably our two big ones, but also the catastrophe that is happening on the Colorado River is helping raise awareness. And it's not just the Colorado River that's in drought. The entire West is seeing a level of drought that we have historically not seen. We're seeing numbers that are like worst on record or second worst on record all over the West in all of our watersheds. And even California that's got water in its reservoirs only has enough water for this year. So what are we going to do going forward? And the big question for me is how are we going to pull everyone together to make this a community-wide response so that it's not a tragedy of the commons? And what I'm seeing that gives me the most excitement is that people are really willing to start thinking outside of the box, reach across the canal to their neighbor and say, how can we lift each other up? How can we do this together? Because fighting over it isn't helping anything and it doesn't make more water. So I'm really hoping to see more on the augmentation front. I would like to see us fighting over a bigger pie than a shrinking pie if we are going to fight. But those probably are the three big ones: Farm Bill, permit reform, bipartisanship, and then this drought. If anything good comes out of it, it will be big ideas in terms of augmentation and the community coming together.
I like your phrase, coming together across the canal to solve some of these very big problems.
Yep.
So, if we fast forward 5 to 10 years, what does a resilient Western agricultural system look like? One that keeps family farms thriving and plates full across America, because this is Fill Your Plate Now podcast. So, we want to have that perspective too. What one or two big moves would get us there fastest, if that's possible to ask, or in general, what do you see in 5 to 10 years?
So resilient agriculture in the West looks like a connection between an understanding of where your food comes from and what you're doing with it essentially. And what I would love to see is funding levels meeting the need out here in the West so that we can keep cities still operating and restaurants and car washes and swimming pools and recreation centers right alongside farmers. But that's going to take investment, continued investment in our infrastructure out here, both municipal conservation and agriculture. And if we can get to a place where we have a steady funding level that meets the consistent need of the West. So similar to the transportation industry. Nobody ever questions whether we need to repave a highway. We just go and repave highways like they're going out of style. We don't do that with our systems in the West when it comes to water. So we need to scale up in terms of the investment and understand that it directly correlates to our food supply and that it directly correlates also to whether people are going to be able to continue to run restaurants and eat out and do the things we like to do, because I don't think what we want to do is go backwards where everyone has to grow their own food supply in their own backyard. We should get to a point where we know how to do that. It's important that we know how to do that. But in reality, my accountant or the person who's working at Walmart doesn't want to have to grow their own food. That's what I'm here for. That's what production ag is here for. So if we can figure out a way to keep filling people's plates by working together, to me, that looks like making sure our infrastructure keeps delivering water to not just farmers, but to the communities as well.
So I want you to give a farmer to farmer message. What would you say to the next generation of Western farmers and ranchers? And then I'm going to have you say that same answer or give that same answer to consumers out west.
To my producer brethren, what I would say is times are hard right now, but they were harder for our grandparents. And they figured it out, right? We can too. We need to work together just like they did. But we can figure this out too, and giving up is not the solution. And so hang in there and work together and figure out how you can reach across the canal to lift people up. And for the others, let's see.
The consumer.
For the consumer, I would say pretty much the same. Trust your farmers, right? Don't immediately go on the attack over water issues or over what might be a lack of understanding of why we do what we do, because we're feeding you and we have for generations. And you want to encourage it to not just be a generational thing like my family, but we want new farmers coming in too. We need them. We are losing farmland and farmers at faster rates than ever before in history. And so we need other industries to recognize our purpose and reach across that canal and help lift us up.
I'm telling you, I love your reach across the canal. I'm going to start using that. One of our social media posts just today was about our canal system. And even though some of these canal systems, and yes, there probably are some infrastructure requirement improvements in certain canals, but some of these canal systems have been around for a while, but they have transitioned to the automatic digitized gate opening and closing again for that whole purpose. So we tried to explain that our irrigation districts use some very sophisticated technology to open and close gates, to shift water in different places, and to turn it off exactly when it needs to be turned off. Again, every drop counts. And so every time you were saying we need to meet across the canal, I was thinking of our social media posts. What are some takeaways, especially for our listeners that might not be in ag, but they have a real passion for supporting farmers and ranchers? They love what we do. They love hearing our farm stories. Listening to you tell about your grandpa saying, "No, I don't want you to go out and irrigate, Samantha. I want you to be our family attorney." You know, those are stories that just really tug at the heartstrings and strings and really cause us all to appreciate. You know, I'm not in farming anymore, but I'd love your counsel on 2 or 3 things that I should be doing to support our farmers and ranchers across the West, certainly.
So, first is knowing where your food and water supply come from. And a lot of what we run into is this concept of farmers just get handouts, right? We get commodities handouts, we get free money for our irrigation infrastructure, but the automation you just talked about on the canals is incredibly expensive. And it's not just farmers who benefit from that, it's cities that the conserved water goes to. It's more crops that we're able to produce, so lower food costs. Then it's the rural community that's seeing the green strips because we've brought water to that area, and making recreation and conservation and habitat possible in some of these places. And so that's all very expensive. Yet, because of how it works on the federal level and funding on most state levels, farmers end up footing most of the bill for that, even though it benefits everyone. And so reaching out to your delegation and saying, look, next time your farmers come to you and say, we need system level improvements, help them out. That's expensive stuff. When a farmer comes to you and says, I don't know what to do, but I need guidance on technology, force the congressional and state delegations to really start supporting farmers as a staffing issue. Another thing just your average everyday person can do, stop wasting food. If we all understood how much food waste actually was water waste, like I said, when it takes, each drop creates a certain amount of crop, and if we were to visualize just pouring water down the drain instead of scraping food into the plate, it might change our view of how long our showers are, whether we're going to wash our car in the middle of this drought. All of those things that we traditionally find important in our lives as luxuries, if you look at things a little bit different and you realize that to keep those luxuries, you might have to reduce your food supply. You might start thinking about that a little bit different. But supporting agriculture can take a lot of different faces, and a lot of it is just public awareness.
What you just described for the first time made me think me supporting a farmer is ultimately supporting myself. It's supporting my health, it's supporting my plate, it's supporting my future. So we've all got to support our farmers and ranchers. I'm going to ask you one final question. What's a favorite farm story that you often share when you're around the family table, just visiting, or a friend finds out for the first time that you grew up on a farm with 4 brothers? Do you have a go-to farm story that you typically tell?
I've been telling this one lately that's actually kind of hilarious because it's recent. It's very recent, but it is actually one of my favorite right now in terms of bridging that gap with other industries and the general public and getting people to understand who we are and what we do and why it's important. I was on a policy call one day with some Hills staff and some other advocacy groups like ours. And I had my desk set up so that you could sort of see out one of my windows, and I saw it happening at the same time, I think, as some of the people on the Zoom screen, but my husband went marching behind me in the window, storming across the yard through the farm, with a shotgun in his hand midday. And so I quickly jump off of this call and run to try and figure out what's going on. And I ran through the house out the one of the back doors, catch him just in time to see him shooting what we now know was a rabid skunk that was wandering around in the middle of the day and near our dogs and some of our animals. And but the worst part was this was just in time for the brand new mailman on our route to pull up. He lives in the city of Las Cruces. He pulls up just in time to see my husband shooting this rabid skunk, me going, "Oh my God, what's happening?" And he just drives off. And then I had to come back to my policy meeting and explain, yes, he did kill the animal, but it needed to be killed. And everyone's sitting there like, what is happening? So that is farm life. We, in the middle of the day, we're farming, whether I'm on policy calls or not. So yeah.
That's a typical, so many of the farm stories. And I finally wrote a book about it called Fresh Air. And we just shared all of our farm stories because most people, when they hear them for the first time, they just get wide-eyed and mystified. And they often say, well, tell me more. And your story of having to put down a rabid animal on the farm it's a farm story. It's real life. Yeah.
It's real.
Well, Samantha, as always, it's so fun to talk to you, and let's keep staying in touch. I'd love to hear the stories that the Family Farm Alliance is engaged in, and I hope to meet some of your board members. I'm sure some of their stories on the farm are just as interesting as that one. But let's stay in touch. And thank you so much for being part of our podcast today. And for our listeners, if you ever have any questions or comments, certainly reach out to us. And we drop our podcast every Thursday morning at 7 a.m. And we're on all of the streaming podcast channels. Thanks again, everyone.